There are moments when life forces us to pause, when the noise of the world is silenced, and all that's left is grief. Today, we pause not for ourselves, but for the lives lost in the Air India plane crash. We pause to remember, we pause to pray, and we pause to honor, because behind every headline, behind every breaking news report, were real people, mothers, fathers, children, friends. There are days that begin like any other. You wake up, check your phone, maybe have your coffee, and step into the routine of your life. But then, a message comes through, a news update flashes, a voice on the radio says something that stops you in your tracks. And in that moment, everything changes. It's hard to find the right words when tragedy strikes. Sometimes there are no words, just silence and sorrow. That's what it felt like when news broke of the Air India plane crash. The world didn't just hear about it, we felt it in our bones, in our hearts, in that deep, sacred place where grief has no language. When I first heard, I froze. There's something about the word crash that carries a weight no one wants to bear. You don't need to know the people on board to feel the pain. It reaches across oceans. It knocks on your door even if you live halfway around the world, because tragedy doesn't need a passport. It goes where the heart can feel. And in that moment, all I could think was, how many lives, how many stories just ended, not just passengers, but people who were loved, people who had dreams, people who had plans for tomorrow. You see, we often live life thinking we have time. We plan ahead, we schedule, we imagine our next vacation, the next birthday, the next quiet Sunday at home. But the truth is, life is so fragile, and sometimes it takes a moment like this to remind us of that reality. A plane that was supposed to land didn't. A journey that was meant to be safe wasn't. It could have been anyone. A father returning home to his family, a student chasing an education, a mother with gifts in her luggage and love in her heart. That's what makes it so hard, because when we hear about tragedy, we don't just think of the names. We think of the faces. We imagine their lives, their last phone calls, their last smiles, and suddenly, the numbers in the news become stories we feel connected to. Not because we knew them, but because we see them in our friends, in our parents, in ourselves. It's in moments like this that we are reminded of how fragile life really is, how quickly everything can shift. One moment, you're in the sky. The next, the world is in mourning. I think about the families who waited at the airport, holding flowers, unaware of the heartbreak just moments away. I think about the empty seats at dinner tables, the phone calls that will never be answered again, the birthdays that will come and go without laughter, and it hurts deeply, but the pain isn't meant to paralyze us. It's meant to move us to care, to pray, to reach out, to hold our loved ones a little tighter and speak our love more freely. Because if there's one thing this tragedy reminds us of, it's that life is not about how long we have, it's about what we do with the time we're given. And no matter how long or short someone's life was, it mattered. They mattered, and their absence will be felt in the quietest corners of the world. In the face of such loss, all we can do is acknowledge the grief. Let it come, let it break us, let it teach us, because pretending we're fine when we're not isn't strength. It's denial, and denial doesn't heal. Only truth does, only love does, only time and God. So, to the hearts left aching from this unimaginable loss, your pain is valid, your tears are seen, and though we may not fully understand what you're going through, we are standing with you in this moment. In prayer, in remembrance, in love, and may we never grow numb to the pain of others, because this world doesn't need more noise. It needs more empathy, more people who care, more moments of silence that honor the lives who can no longer speak for themselves. This wasn't just a headline, this wasn't just a plane, these were people, and they deserve to be remembered. They weren't just passengers on a flight, they were people, real people with stories, with dreams. With families waiting at the other end of the journey, they had favorite songs, they had inside jokes with their siblings, they had routines just like all of us. Maybe they had a favorite seat by the window, or a photo in their wallet that they always kept close. Maybe someone on that flight had just fallen in love. Maybe someone had just said goodbye to a season of their life, ready to start something new. They were more than numbers, But in times like this, it's easy for the world to forget that. We hear fatalities, we read victims, we scroll past the headlines, but what if instead we paused? What if instead of thinking in statistics, we thought in stories? What if we reminded ourselves that behind every name was a soul, a person, a life, someone's son, someone's daughter, someone who was texting "see you soon" just moments before the plane took off? And maybe, in the chaos of life, we forget to look closely. But if we allow ourselves to feel, to imagine, to really step into the shoes of the people we lost, we will see that they were just like us. People with plans, people who had dinner reservations, people who had books they hadn't finished, people who were loved deeply, fiercely. Someone on that flight might have been excited about going home after a long trip. Maybe there was a little child on board, excited to see their grandparents. Maybe there was a woman carrying gifts for her family, packed with care and wrapped in love. Maybe there was someone quiet and kind who always gave up their seat on the train, who smiled at strangers, who was planning to propose to someone next week. These are the people we lost, and even if we didn't know them personally, their stories matter. Their memories deserve to be carried. Their lives should not fade into the noise of tomorrow's news. It's heartbreaking to think about how ordinary that day might have begun, how some of them were probably worried about missing their flight or forgetting something at home. How maybe one of them had a playlist ready to listen to during takeoff. How maybe someone had told their child, "I'll be home soon, okay," not knowing it would be their last goodbye. It's the small details that make grief feel so heavy. It's the thought that someone left their shoes by the door, thinking they'd wear them again, that someone left a message unread, planning to reply after landing, that someone's dog is still waiting by the window. And that's what makes loss so painful. It's not just the big moments we lose. It's the everyday ones, the hugs, the laughter, the shared silence, the presence of someone who meant everything to someone else. Let us never be the kind of people who let stories die with the people. Let us choose to remember that these were individuals with hearts full of love and courage. Let us speak their names, even if softly. Let us hold space for the families who will never be the same again, because grief is not just about what was lost, it's also about what was left behind, the love, the memories, the echo of someone's voice when they walked into a room. The way they made others feel, that's what we carry forward. We can't change what happened, we can't bring them back, but we can choose to remember them with gentleness, with reverence, with dignity. Every life lost in that crash had a name, a story, a heartbeat, and though the world may move on, their memory doesn't have to disappear. We can hold it, we can honor it in our prayers, in our silence, in our tears, and maybe, just maybe, in doing so, we remind ourselves of something bigger, that love doesn't end with loss, it lives on, in those who remember. There's something about grief that humbles us all. It doesn't ask for permission, it doesn't knock gently, it just arrives, suddenly, completely, and without warning, and when it does, all the things we thought were important suddenly fall silent. Titles, positions, deadlines, plans. They all fade when someone is gone, but grief, as painful as it is, carries a strange kind of power. It reveals something that often hides in plain sight, our shared humanity, because when we see another person cry, something in us aches too. When we hear about a tragedy that has taken lives, even if we don't know the victims, we still feel a heaviness deep in our chest. That's the miracle of being human. We were created to feel, not just for ourselves, but for each other. And in moments like this, when a plane crash takes not just lives but pieces of people's hearts with it, we are reminded pain connects us. It doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak, what faith you believe in, what your background is. When tragedy strikes, walls fall, borders don't matter, grief becomes a bridge that brings us closer. You might be thousands of miles away, watching the news on a screen, and yet, your heart is right there with the families at the airport, with the loved ones waiting for someone who will never walk through the arrival gates. And suddenly, this isn't just their tragedy, it becomes ours too, because grief, when met with compassion, becomes a shared experience. And in that shared experience, we find unity. We find ourselves lighting candles in memory of people we've never met. We find ourselves whispering prayers for strangers. We find ourselves reaching out, sending messages of comfort, showing up in small, quiet ways. And sometimes that's all we can do. Show up, be present, mourn with those who mourn. It's beautiful, really, how in the middle of deep sadness, the human spirit can still rise. We show up for each other not because we have the answers, but because we have hearts that care. Because when someone loses a loved one, no words can truly fix it, but presence, love, prayer, those things help hold the broken pieces together. Grief teaches us that we are all more connected than we think. It shows us that no one is really a stranger in this world, not when we choose to feel, to care, and to walk beside those who are hurting. In those quiet moments when the world feels heavy, we find comfort not just in faith, but in each other. In the embrace of a friend, in the text that simply says, "I'm here," in the communities that gather to pray, to remember, to honor. It's not about grand gestures, it's about unity in spirit, about choosing to stand together in sorrow instead of hiding from it. There is something sacred about grief when it brings people together. It softens the heart. It reminds us of what truly matters. It clears away the noise and brings us back to the basics: love, presence, and shared humanity. And maybe that's the hidden gift in it, that even in the face of loss, we can find each other, we can find hope, because unity in grief doesn't mean we all feel the same pain. It means we choose to carry it together, to hold space for one another, to cry with those who cry, and somehow when we do that, the burden feels just a little lighter. So even if we feel helpless watching from afar, know that your prayers matter. Your quiet tears matter, your empathy matters, because grief that is shared becomes bearable, and a world that grieves together, heals together when everything feels shattered, when the world suddenly becomes unfamiliar. When the silence in your home is too loud to bear, that's when you start looking for something, anything, that can hold you up, because there are moments when pain becomes too heavy, moments when the questions don't stop. Moments when you're not even sure how you're still breathing. The kind of grief that arrives like a wave and pulls everything away from underneath you. And in those moments, where do you go? What do you hold on to when you can't see past the tears? For so many of us, we find ourselves turning to something deeper, something beyond what the eyes can see, something that doesn't explain the pain, but somehow sits with us in it. We turn to faith, not because it answers every question, but because it reminds us we're not alone. There's a kind of comfort that faith brings. It's not always loud, it's not always seen, but it's there, steady, gentle, constant, like a whisper in your soul saying, "You will make it through this." Sometimes you don't even realize you're praying. You just find yourself saying, "Lord, help me." And that simple cry becomes the anchor that keeps you from drowning, because the truth is, there are things in life we'll never fully understand. We try to make sense of tragedy. We try to search for meaning, but some losses leave us with no answers, just a void, and in that void, all we can do is trust that even when we don't see the whole picture, we are still held by a God who does. That's the power of faith. It doesn't take away the pain, but it gives us something to lean on when we can't stand on our own. In the quiet moments after the tears have stopped falling, in the stillness of early morning when you wake up and remember all over again what's missing. That's when faith speaks the loudest. It tells you you are not forgotten. It reminds you there is still purpose even in the pain. It promises you this is not the end. And somehow, even in the darkness, you begin to see a flicker of light. Not because the grief is gone, but because grace entered the room. There's a kind of peace that doesn't come from understanding. It comes from surrender. It's the kind of peace that says, even though I don't know why this happened, I believe God is still with me. And maybe that's what faith really is, not the absence of pain, but the presence of hope even in it. It's knowing that while we may never get back the person we lost, we are still surrounded by love that doesn't end. We are carried by prayers, spoken and unspoken. We are lifted by memories that remind us of love's power, and we are strengthened by a God who sees every tear and still calls us his. To anyone who has ever felt the sting of loss, to anyone who is still learning how to breathe again after their world changed, know this: you don't have to pretend to be strong. You don't have to have it all together. You just have to show up and let God meet you right where you are, because even in the heartbreak, He is close. Even in the confusion, He is still working, and even in the deepest valley, His hand never lets go. So let the tears fall, let the grief flow, but in the middle of it all, hold on to faith, because faith will hold you when nothing else can. It will steady you when the world spins too fast, and it will remind you day by day that this is not where your story ends. Love never dies, and neither does hope. Even in loss, we are not lost. Even in sorrow, we are still surrounded by grace, and in that quiet, sacred space, we begin to heal. There comes a moment, after the tears have fallen and the silence begins to settle, when we are left with a choice, not just to mourn, but to remember, not just to look back in sorrow, but to look forward with purpose. Because after every tragedy, we are given a quiet invitation to honor, to reflect, and to carry something beautiful forward from the pain. The truth is, we cannot undo what has happened. We cannot rewind time or rewrite the ending. But what we can do, what we must do, is allow their lives to mean something beyond the moment they were taken. We can choose to live differently because of them. We can choose to pause, to listen, and to let their memory shape the way we move through the world. Honoring those we've lost isn't just about lighting candles or saying their names, though those things matter. It's about carrying their spirit into our own lives. It's about choosing to be a little more patient, a little more kind, a little more present with the people who are still here. It's easy to get swept back into routine. The world moves fast even after loss. But in the quiet spaces between the headlines and the noise, we are being asked, what will you do now? How will you let this change you? We can honor them by how we live, by loving our families more intentionally, by saying, I love you more often, even when it feels awkward, by apologizing first, by laughing more, by putting our phones down when someone is speaking, by choosing to forgive not because it's easy, but because life is too short to carry the weight of anger. They remind us, those we lost, that every breath we have is a gift. Every second is sacred, and nothing in this life is guaranteed. So while we still have time, let us leave it well. Let us be fully here. Let us show up, not just for the big moments, but for the quiet ones too. Let us call the people we've been meaning to call. Let us mend broken relationships, even if it's just one small step at a time, because in remembering those who are no longer with us, we find clarity. Clarity about what truly matters. Clarity about the kind of legacy we want to leave behind. It's not about perfection, it's about purpose. Maybe they didn't get to finish their story, but maybe we are being called to carry a piece of it with us. Maybe we're meant to love the way they loved, dream the way they dreamed, give the way they gave, because honoring them doesn't mean we stay in grief forever. It means we take what they gave this world and we multiply it. Their lives weren't just lost, they were lived, and that matters. So let's reflect on what we're doing with the time we have left. Are we living in fear or in faith? Are we holding on to things that don't really matter? Or are we letting go so we can be free? Are we building a life that feels true to who we are? Or are we just surviving each day? These aren't easy questions, but in moments like this, they're the ones worth asking. Because grief has a way of waking us up, it shakes us, it strips away the distractions, and it invites us into something deeper, something more real. So today, as we remember those who were lost, let us make a quiet promise. To live not just for ourselves, but for the ones who no longer can, to speak with more gentleness, to live with more grace, to forgive more quickly, to walk through life not just existing, but truly living. And to never forget not just the tragedy, but the lives, the hearts, the souls. They may be gone from this earth, but they are not gone from our story. And if we choose to honor them not only in grief, but in how we live, then their light never truly fades. It continues through us. So let us reflect, not with despair, but with hope. Let us honor, not only with tears, but with action. Let us remember, and in remembering, choose to become better. Softer, stronger, kinder for them, and for the gift of life we still get to live, as we remember those who are no longer with us, Let us live in a way that honors them with more love, more kindness, more grace. And may our prayers rise higher than our pain. May we find healing in grief and in prayer.